Everyone, glad to have you today. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you for being here. Welcome to the Provo Municipal Council meeting, Tuesday, March 15th, 2022 at 5:34 p.m. Meetings of the Municipal Council are now being held in hybrid fashion. That is, members of the public can continue to view council meetings on YouTube and Facebook, or they may attend in person in the council chamber at the Provo City Center.
Recording in progress.
I remind participants to mute your microphone when not speaking to minimize the potential for background noises and conversations to be picked up, recorded, and broadcast for all to hear. We have with us today council members Whipple, Handley, myself, Travis Hoban, council member Shipley, McKay, and online we have, let me see here. Somebody reset my computer, so hold on one second. Looks like that's all we have with us today so far. Councilmember Bill Fillmore had a conflict and wasn't going to be able to be here today. We've got various members of the council staff, our attorney Brian Jones, and welcome CAO Wayne Parker from the city, and all of you. Glad you're here. The opening prayer today will be by Councilor Dave Shipley.
Our Father in heaven, we thank thee for the ability to meet. We thank thee for the ability to discuss openly city business. We thank thee for an opportunity to serve. We thank thee for good people in this community that make Provo a wonderful place, people who are willing to work for the city and serve the city. We thank thee for them and bless them. We ask a blessing upon those who are in conflict, a blessing of comfort, but also a blessing upon all of us to receive direction and have courage to help and find ways to be of assistance and be thy hands to serve. We say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Thank you, Councilor Shipley. Our pledge of allegiance will be provided by John Magnus, our interim director. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, John. John, just to break it up, would you mind reading the public comment preamble for us?
I didn't know that was part of the job.
It's your 15 seconds of fame, my friend.
I might have turned it down. As indicated on the screen, a required public hearing will be held for certain agenda items prior to council action. After each such item has been presented, time to comment will be provided for all those who wish to speak. For items that do not require a public hearing, public comment will still be taken following the presentation of the item, but will be limited to 10 minutes. At this time, up to 15 minutes may have been set aside for an open public comment period, which is intended to allow comment on matters that do not appear on the agenda. Persons who speak during this time to an item that is not on the agenda will not normally be afforded a second opportunity to speak during the comment period specific to that item. During a public comment period, each speaker will generally be limited to 2 minutes. Due to notice requirements, no formal action was taken in this meeting on matters that do not appear on the agenda. For those comments are invited to approach the podium. Those participating on Zoom will need to use the raise hand feature as indicated they wish to be comment. The chair may choose to alternate between the person online commenters. Please begin your comments by stating your name and city of residence. You'll have 2 minutes to speak. To assist the city recorder with the minutes, we ask those commenting in person to print your name on a slip of paper provided at the back of the room and place it in the container near the podium. Online commenters should spell out their names before commenting.
All right. Just, I guess, to tag on to that. So we're trying to have a little bit more of a formal decorum. And so if you are commenting from the seats or up here, we're going to try to remember to speak into the mics and all that. So makes it easier on the recorder who has to be able to write down what people are saying. All right, our first action agenda item has been moved. Oh, my bad. We will now open up for public comment. Anyone who is here to address the council for 2 minutes on a topic, an item that's not on the agenda, is welcome to come up. Okay, looks like there's nobody in the chamber. I don't see any hands online either, so we'll go ahead and move forward. Thanks, Dave, for keeping me on track. All right, we have our first action agenda item has been, we're going to go ahead and move that to give Councilor Ellsworth some time to join. We'll move to action agenda item number 2, an implied motion on a discussion regarding the wastewater collection system master plan adoption. This will be presented by Dave Decker, Director of Public Works. Okay, come on up. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair Hoban. And thank you to the council. I'm going to just give a very, very brief overview on the wastewater master plan. This was discussed in pretty significant detail about a month ago with the council in a work session. And I'm not going to go back through the presentation unless there's any specific questions. I just wanted to inform the public a little bit about the process and some basics about the wastewater master plan. So the current master plan was adopted in 2013, and the new plan, if it's adopted tonight, would be in March of 2022. So it's been about 9 years since these two master plans, between these two master plans, and that's about the timing that most consultants recommend a master plan update. It's between 7 to 10 years. Bowen and Collins is the consulting firm that did the update, and they've done an excellent job. Just a couple of basic, basic review things that they look at when they update a master plan. Obviously, the population and the density of the city is looked at, not just current population, but looking into the future. So that's one of the considerations. They also look at the system maintenance. In particular, they look at what we refer to in the industry as I&I, or inflow and infiltration. Those are a couple of basic pieces of information that may affect the sewer system, as I explained in the work session. That primarily is water from the outside of the pipes creeping in, either through cracks or joints in the pipe. So, and obviously can affect the operation of the system. They look at lift stations, and also there's a section on the treatment plant. It should be noted that this master plan is not a full-scale treatment plant master plan. That's a separate document in Public Works, and just given the complexity of that, that's probably appropriate. The result of the master plan, basically from the hydraulic modeling and their review, generates a project list. And we went through a lot of the projects. And again, I'm willing to do that if there's any questions from the council, but there's a project list that's generated. And a couple of things come out of that project list. One of the important things, and it's the next item on your agenda, those projects are identified by the consultant and also a financial consultant, impact fee specialist. And they evaluate those projects and determine what percentage of those projects are eligible for impact fee funding. And I'm not going to steal any more than that, but that's one of the key next steps after a master plan. So with that very brief presentation, unless there's any questions, that's all I intended to present tonight.
Any questions on this item? All right, it's just a discussion, so I guess there's not much discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next agenda item is an implied motion on an ordinance amending Provo City Code to modify and enact impact fees for wastewater and to modify provisions regarding the imposition and administration of impact fees. This is Keith Larson and Susie Becker. Was I supposed to open that last piece up?
Yes.
You're so tired.
I think he wants it. I think he wants us to.
Well, I just said a discussion, so.
This Council Chair Hoban and the council, pleasure to come for you and discuss this ordinance. I'll just read the ordinance here. An ordinance amending the Provo City Code to adopt an updated wastewater impact fee analysis and sewer impact fee facilities plan to modify the impact fees for wastewater. And with the completion of the wastewater master plan that Dave Decker just presented to the council, along with that, we updated our information so that we take another look at the overall cost of growth and the impact fees that would be adjusted as a result of this updated plan. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce Susie Becker, who is with Zions Public Finance. She is a consultant that we worked with as well, and she will come up and kind of go over a brief presentation with you. Keith Larson would have been here, but he had another conflict. He's the consultant that's kind of worked with us on this as well, but I'll turn the time over to Susie. They should be able to pull it up. You should have the presentation right on the list. Okay.
I think that's coming up. Thanks so much for letting us work with you. Keith Larson did from Bone Collins, prepared the impact fee facilities plan, which is more technical engineering related document. And then Zions Public Finance, we prepared the impact fee analysis. So I'm just going to take just a few minutes. You've had a detailed presentation on this and just hit a few of the highlights. So the fee, the maximum fee that can be charged that we calculated could go up. And it based on several factors. But the thing I want to emphasize first is what's in bold on the bottom of this slide, that all updates that we have completed follow the exact same methodology that was established by the Impact Fee Review Committee done in 2018. So no changes to approach have been done, but we've just seen a few changes in some of the inputs to the model that calculates the impact fees. So the first three are fairly minor. Their engineers updated a few of the equivalent residential connection growth projections, changed density a little. Net impact was really only about a 5% decrease in projected ERCs. Not a big impact there. They updated the pre-ERC sewer flow projections, as you can see there, 238 versus 247. Not a big change there. They updated the proportional use of capacity, therefore based on the updated flow projections, but this fourth bullet is the big one. They updated the list of needed projects and what have construction costs been doing, going through the roof. So let's go to the next slide and you can see that. You can see there's the two basic components to an impact fee analysis, the collection system and the treatment system. And you can see that overall in that time period, costs have gone up by $62 million. So if we look at the next slide, you can see what happens then to the fees with construction costs, new improvements going up that dramatically. So will it go to the next slide? There we go. This one's a little harder to see here. It shows how the calculation is done between the treatment in the first section, then the collection. And then you can see there's a little bit of credits there because of a bond outstanding so that no one pays twice. And we end up there with a final fee of about $4,400. How does that compare to what we saw previously? The next slide will show us that. There we go. We had $2,371. Now we're up to $4,450. So it's about a $2,000 increase. Again, just to reiterate, what are the reasons for this increase in the fee? Treatment, significant construction inflation. On the collection system, significant construction inflation. a little bit of shift in the fees away from buying into existing excess capacity to the cost of new, which is always less to the cost of new construction. And then the credit calculation was less because less of a bond was needed to be issued, which in the long run is a good thing. But then there was a little bit less of a credit that we also calculated on the fees. And I think that that is it. Oh, we have one more, I think, where we compare. Yes, we do compare with some other communities. We have been contacted by several of these communities lately, one just this week in Utah County, who said we want to update our sewer fees. We feel like costs are going up pretty significantly. We just want to amend it. We don't want to change anything else, which is similar to yours. So I think you're similar in this to what we see. You can see there the difference between your current and your proposed. And the proposed, when it says proposed, really means maximum fee. It's up to you to set the policy and decide what fee to charge. But that's the proposed fee that would cover your costs. And if they're not covered by new development, then the burden falls on the existing homeowners. But you can see that it is near the top of this list here in terms of cost. So any questions on this? Thank you.
Okay. Are there any questions from the council? Yeah, well, usually we ask questions, then we go public comment, then we go discussion. Okay. Doesn't appear to be any questions. So we will now open this item up for public comment. If anyone would like to comment, come on out. And just please state your name. If you
My
would.
name's Eileen Miller. I'm with the Utah Valley Home Builders Association. We just have one request, and that is that, I've had 5 meetings with Provo City since the impact fee was discussed, the increase. And that includes a private meeting that I had and also the open meetings that we've had, the public hearings and such. We just have one request, and that is that the building permits that have already been issued and that will be issued before the effective date of this ordinance, that they be assessed under the old fee structure and not under the new one, out of fairness. It's very difficult right now. As you know, the building industry is having a very difficult time getting materials. It's delaying the completion of their projects. And in consideration of the cities that are trying desperately to help with the housing shortage and in consideration of that, that would be our one request. And also we would request that it be in writing, that be something that they could count on, that it is set in stone so that they can finish the projects and not have to worry about the delays in building materials and being assessed at the higher rate. So that's that would be our request.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Let's leave it open for public comment and then you can
Sure, and then I
respond.
can respond to her question.
Yeah, that'd be great. Are there any other comments from the public? I don't see any raised hands online. So we'll go ahead and we'll close public comment on that. And yeah, come on up, John.
So a couple things I would mention. There is a 90-day requirement by state law that before this can be implemented or it can go into place, has to be 90 days from today. The recommendation from administration would be for the council to consider implementing on July 1st, which is just a little bit beyond 90 days. Normally, the way that it works, though, is that if a building permit is issued between now and if you were to agree to implement it on July 1st, it would be the old fee. Any building permits that are issued after July 1st would be the new fee. And I guess the question is, I think the way that it works is when the homeowner or the future homeowner or the builder that's building a spec home, when they issue the permit, that's when the fee is assessed. And so based on Eileen's question or request, if that's her understanding, then they would automatically fall under the old. If there was a project that they were in the middle of and building permits had not been issued, then the new fee would be effective on anything that was, any permits that were issued after July 1st. So.
So I guess we're set up for what was requested, essentially. We're set up for that already. That's de facto. And is that, in writing, is that?
I'm trying to interpret exactly what the question is here a little bit. So let me take a little bit of a stab at maybe what the question is and describe a little circumstance, and then maybe between John and other people in the audience, they can say, yeah, that's the right assumption, or maybe I'm completely off here. But development projects oftentimes go through a little bit of a process, and once they're approved by development services and public works and other departments that are involved in the development, they go through a site plan improvement, and for subdivisions, that can take 18 months and sometimes a little bit longer, depending on the size of the project. Building permits are not issued for that. There's an excavation and sewer and water and streets are built, but building permits where the assessment for the sewer impact fee, they are not done until all of the streets and utilities are finalized. And so if there's a project that's going on right now, they could potentially lapse over that July 1st date. And so, the pavement and the finalization for the streets and the utilities may be done after July 1st, and then applications start for the official building permits where these fees may be assessed. And that may be a little bit of the concern is that may be the correct assumption here. So I'm just trying to explain a situation where we may have a project underway, but building permits aren't technically applied for and issued yet on that.
Yeah. I think what I'm reading from the comment was, we started this project under a certain business model, and now now we're adding $2,000 per unit or whatever. So,
Chair Hoban, I just say, I think that makes sense, and you're probably this probably isn't going to help you as you struggle with the issue. But the one thing to be careful about is, if you have an inclination to do something about that, we're going to have to think carefully about how to do it, because it's not necessarily uncommon for somebody to, look at, Midtown 360 in Orem, right? I mean, you could have a project where you're in that first phase and you're asking now to be grandfathered, but you don't move to the next phase until 5 years from now because of something that happened during the project. So.
Mr. Hanley or Councilor Hanley?
Yeah, so I don't know that there's an easy answer to this question. I just figure the concern has to be raised. It seems like we've got very, very important competing interests, right? We want to keep housing prices down, and yet we have to keep our impact fees keeping pace with cost to the city, or otherwise we're losing money. And I just want to ask if, in the opinion of Ms. Becker or anyone else you represent, if you feel like that was taken into consideration. I'm not even sure how it gets taken into consideration exactly, but I guess the question I'm asking is this the only choice we have, basically, to cover our costs?
No, and we certainly want to be understanding that people have started this process, but there does seem to need to be some limited time frame. The legislature's decided 90 days. If you wanted to extend it further, you could do that, and it could be till July 1st.
Let me just interrupt. I'm not asking about the timing here. I'm just asking about the general policy of increasing the impact fees to the amount that has been specified here, in light of a housing market costs that are going out of control. And I know
that's part of the reason why we're also raising the fees is because our costs are going out of control. But I'm worried about the fact that we're tacking on more to the cost of a house.
Yeah, just let me answer that and just also say many people will let them pull building permits. They'll pull a lot of building permits right now before the date. But then to go on to your question, most communities enact to the maximum amount and are looking to raise it. They don't all. Some will look at neighboring communities and for years we're concerned that builders would build there instead of in their community. We saw little of that. We've seen some do ramping up, but that is out of the ordinary. Almost every case enacts it to the maximum because if not, you're putting that burden on existing, homeowners or people
Right.
who may be trying to save up to get, a home. They're also paying that way. So generally, we do see people enacting it to the maximum. So, but not always.
Okay, thank you.
So I would just mention that Eileen and I just talked, and she said that her feeling is as long as the building permit is issued prior to July 1st, that they get, if that's the implementation date, she feels that would be fine if they would get the old current rate, which is the way it would be. The only thing I would say, Councilman Hanley, is that the alternative is to pass on those costs to the ratepayers. And that can be done, but the whole design and the idea behind impact fees is for those developers or homeowners that are contributing to the growth, that they pay that cost of the growth. And there's a lot of work and effort that goes into the study to make sure that that meets the laws, and the laws are there designed to make sure that it is growth and nothing else. And so I would just mention that. So.
Councilor McKay.
I do think it's best to put the increase in those impact fees on the developer, but I am really glad that they have the 90 days and if they have their permit. I have multiple friends building houses right now and prices are increasing so much, so fast that they're even above their loan now, right? Like there's all these issues with, and knowing that the permit shows those costs and that they're not going to change is my biggest issue. So if we've got that covered, I think we're probably good.
Any additional questions or comments? Councilor Whip.
Yeah, I would just think that the point at which the building permit is issued is when the right to that particular fee vests. But if they haven't gone to that point, then they can't lock it in. So I'm entirely fine with giving them this notice in the 90 days. That seems to be fair and consistent with law.
Okay. Okay. So we need to vote on this. We'll go ahead and vote on this item. All in favor? Unanimous here in the chamber, and we're still waiting for Councilor Ellsworth to join us. She has not yet, so.
Can you scroll down to part 3 or 4, maybe? Part 4D is where it says July 1st.
Okay, that passes unanimously with Councilors Fillmore and Ellsworth excused. Thank you for all those who participated in that item. Our next agenda item is a resolution transferring $508,088 from the general fund to the airport fund for an interfund loan payment to the energy fund and appropriating $18,035 of that transfer in the airport fund for interfund loan interest. This will be presented by John Borgett, Administrative Services Director.
Thank you. So a couple of years ago, on April 21st, 2020, the council approved an interfund loan to purchase some property adjacent to the airport. It was done from a loan from Energy, and it's a 10-year loan. And what the intent was with the loan is that when the airport had the ability to make the payment on this loan, that we were going to have the airport do that. I would just mention, as we all know, that the airport's making great strides with the terminal going to be opening in May, June timeframe. I'm still very optimistic that during this 10-year period that the airport will get to where it can service that. But in the meantime, due to the fact that we're still kind of in expansion and building mode, the airport's not an ability to pay the loan. Currently, the general fund is still subsidizing the airport. And so we're recommending that the council approve this transfer for $508,000. This is our second year. The loan was for $4.9 million, and this will bring it down to $3.9 million. We also feel it's very important that we meet the terms of this agreement, and that we pay Energy back based on the agreed upon time, along with agreed upon interest. The interest is based on the state pool rate, which is the same rate that Energy would have received had they had the money invested in the state pool. And so we're recommending this. I think I provided an amortization schedule and the resolution. It's only $18,000 represents interest, and that's because right now the state pool is roughly 1/3%. I'm sure if we look at our savings accounts, the interest rates are pretty low. But if it goes up, we'll meet that as well. And so with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. So.
So, when we passed this, we thought, there's going to be some ramp up, there's going to be some expansion. Realistically, we're going to probably cover this out of general fund for a while. Does the airport project over the next 5 to 7 years within the terms of this loan are there any projections or analysis at this point that would give us cause to think that within a few years they can handle this? Or, based on, I guess I'm just trying to get a sense of like, how soon do we say, hey, however you're going to grow airport, you need to grow in a way that can take care of this payment. And I don't think that's probably how we've communicated to them. I don't think that's, but it might make sense to consider, at some point saying, look, you can grow, but grow in a way that gets us closer to this sooner than later.
Yeah. I would just share from my observation, and I'm not an airport analyst, I'm a finance person, but I think we're doing all the right things on getting the airport business built and being in a position where it's going to be a great asset to the valley and the state and the community. But as we're doing this and as we're building this business, as I'm sure you're aware, a lot of times you have some negative working capital and there's some things to take into place, but a lot of it depends on everything falling into place, but I'm confident that it will. But as far as actual projections, right now, our projections are more in the short term as we're over the next couple of years, as we're trying to attract additional airlines and build the business. But I'm optimistic and think it's very likely that in the 3 to 5 year time frame that we could be servicing this debt. But for the next couple of years, I would say no.
Probably still general fund.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Additional questions? Okay, we'll open this item up for public comment. Anyone in the chamber or online would like to comment on this item, please let us know. Okay, doesn't look like there's any comments. We'll turn it back to the council for discussion. Any discussion on the item? Okay. Well, I guess we'll take a vote on the resolution. All in favor of this resolution? That's unanimous in the chamber. Oh, Councilor Ellsworth is now here. Great. Councilor Ellsworth?
Yes.
Yes, that is unanimous with Counselor Bill Fillmore excused.
Mr. Chair, with that item done, if we could return to item 2. Oh, sorry, Malia gave me a thumbs up. Okay, I guess not yet. I'll explain why, and then I'll let you know when we're ready. As you know, when we got to that item, we didn't actually take a vote or even open it up for public comment because there was some paperwork missing. Staff's been working on that and it's almost prepared, but we just had a computer crash right at the inopportune moment.
Yeah, we'll go back to it as.
That got after the next.
Yeah,
meeting.
absolutely. Yeah, I think we'll go back to item number 1 now that we have Counselor Ellsworth joining us. Action agenda. Item number 1, a resolution to approve a real estate purchase contract between Provo City Corporation and RD Development Holdings for the sale of property at approximately 1600 South, 2500 East, Buckley Draw for a residential development. Oh, okay. This will be presented by Tara Riddle. Well, hi, Tara.
Hi, good evening. And thank you for adjusting the agenda. I appreciate that. So just to give you a little bit of history on this property before we get started, if I can have the slide presentation brought up. For those of you that are familiar with the Buckley Draw property, it's located down on Slate Canyon Drive, adjacent to Nevada Avenue. We acquired this property back in 1995 from Utah County. And the reason we purchased it is at the time we were looking at trying to expand the cemetery. So we found some property that we thought would be able to accommodate that. But upon further study, we decided to actually expand the cemetery to the west at its current location. And so since then, this property is just sat vacant. The original parcel also included the property across the street where there's currently a chapel. So about 5.5 acres was sold to the LDS Church back in 2000, so 22 years ago. The property that's been left over and what was surplus back in February of 2019 was the remaining property from Utah County, plus over time, we've acquired 2 other parcels. You'll notice these 3 little tiny pieces that sit in the parcel. Those are pieces that are remnant from the old Still City subdivision. And they were parcels that were sold as tax deeds. So they were ones that became delinquent on taxes, and we've acquired those over time, except for one of them. So the smallest parcel is still privately owned. And so the developer will need to work with them. Okay. So since the property's been on the surplus property list, we've talked to several developers, but we've never actually received an official offer until recently.
Hey, Tara.
Yes.
Hold on a sec. Hey, John. You're fine. Appreciate it. I was just wondering if you guys could step outside and chat.
I just thought they were heckling me, so I was just ignoring.
Well, they were off and on. All right, go ahead.
Okay, so we received an offer from the buyer for just over $5.3 million, which actually was equal to the appraisal that we had done on the property. And I actually prepared a counter offer at $6 million. And the intent was, for those of you that were on the council about 1.5 years, 2 years ago, we sold property to the Livingston Group where we actually decided to carry the property. So actually ended up being kind of the loan agent on it, where we carried the value of the property. We decided to do the same thing on this property. So how this will work is the buyer will make a $50,000 earnest money deposit as a down payment. And then they'll sign a note for the remaining amount, which is the $5,950,000. This will be held in a non-interest bearing account, or it won't be gaining any interest. And we'll be holding the property for 18 months after the closing date. So the note will be secured with a trust deed that will be recorded against all of the units in the development. So as the developer starts selling those units, they'll incrementally pay off that loan. So let's say hypothetically, they assign a value of $30,000 to each door. Every time they sell a unit, we'll be getting a check for $30,000 until the total amount is paid off. And as they're paid off, we'll grant a partial release to the note. One of the other things that is important to note in the purchase agreement is that we originally gave him 30 days after we signed the contract and after it's approved by the council for them to close on the property. But they are going to be going through a rezoning. Currently, the property is zoned PF and a portion of it is agricultural. They're looking at rezoning the property to probably R110 or R18. So it will be single-family houses. I know that's been a question that many people have asked. We had committed to the neighborhood back when this property was initially looking at being surplused, that we would not be looking at multiple family or high density, that it would be single-family houses. So we're going to give them plenty of time to get through that process. The other thing to note, which I know has been a question, is where the money will be going once this is closed on. Another commitment we had made to the neighborhood is any money that we make on this property will be spent on park improvements down in the southeast area. So the last thing is that the contract, although it's been signed by the mayor, it is subject to approval by the council. That's why we're coming to you tonight for the resolution. So are there any questions?
We do, from Councilor Ellsworth.
Hey, thanks, Tara. I'm wondering if the staff has made any commitments to the buyer outside of zoning it for R110 or R18.
So commitments beyond zoning, no.
Okay, have they made any commitments that, hey, this could be a higher density, this could be a VLDR, this could be an R16, or is it pretty consistent internally that this is intended to be R110 and R18?
I think the discussion we've had with them, as well as with development services, that it'd be R18 or R110. Now, with that said, both of those zones would allow them to cluster some of their development so that they'd be able to avoid some of the more sensitive areas on this property. If you're familiar with the property, it has some elevation changes. We also have a debris flow basin that'll need to be accommodated. And so we are going to have some flexibility, but as far as the overall density, that will not change.
Okay, that's helpful. Thanks.
Councilor Shipley.
So does them being able to get the zone changed to what they want void if they don't get a zone change, does it void the contract?
I think if they don't get the zoning that they're needing in order to make this paper, then it would probably get them out of the
But it's
contract.
understood that R110 or R18 would make it
That's
paper.
part of our plan. That's been in the master plan. And so we intend on approving the zoning that they're going to need.
Okay, thanks.
Councilor Hanley.
Thank you. I don't know if you can pull up the map. I just had a question about the boundary lines to the east. I'm just curious, both in terms of potential problems with the hillside. I don't know if any of this is in the critical hillside overlay zone as it gets closer up there, but those sort of dirt road lines that go through that portion, I think the Bonneville shoreline is the upper one. Am I correct on that?
Yes.
Okay. That's one of these weird things where there's multiple Bonneville shorelines. The Bonneville shoreline that's way up there is a very thin single track, but the trail that gets the most use in terms of foot and bike traffic is that lower road. Which is kind of like it's kind of the equivalent of the Bonneville Shoreline Trail, like around the Y parking lot, which is a wider thing. So I'm just wondering if there's going to be any easement issues there, or would there be a plan in the this is obviously premature. We'll be looking at development plans later, but would it be something that the developer is looking at to sort of plan or build around or anything like that?
So as we go through the approval process for their overall plan, we have discussed being able to have access up to the Bonneville Shoreline Trail. And certainly if we're needing improvements along the trail, that's something the Parks Department would be addressing through the approval process.
Okay. And I had one other question, and that was the sale of the property the purchase of the property that we bought, and it's just north of here, south of Slate Canyon. and maybe it's related to my question about the trails. I'm just, we don't really know yet what exactly Parks and Rec and anyone else is going to come up with for how we want to design that area. But that's just something I'm maybe a little nervous about, keenly interested in making sure that there's sort of a corridor there of use, because presumably more people are going to be recreating just south of Slate Canyon. And that makes this area even more appealing. It's a very appealing area right now. But if the buildings are going to go right up to the edge of that property, it might kind of pinch out any sort of easy access around it.
Well, just having sat in several meetings with the Parks Department, their intent is to have a very cohesive trail system as it goes down through this property.
Okay.
Certainly on the east side, you do have elevation, so I think there's going to be plenty of buffer between the residential units and where the trail will actually be.
Okay. Do you know, Mr. Pepperoni, if this was in the critical hillside? Oh, it is. You're saying? I think it is, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I'm looking at a map here that indicates that it is. Yeah, okay.
Well, I think what you're saying is, do we need to address this in advance or just take the chance that all is going to work out? I mean, that's the question, right?
Well, I was just thinking about timing. We passed the critical hillside before we agreed to the surplus, so I assume we were thinking about along those lines. I'm just not connecting the dots in my head. I'm just making sure that it's on everyone's radar that what we're talking about developing and what it might end up creating, both as an opportunity or a cost if we're not careful.
Yeah, I think we're on the same page.
Okay.
Yeah.
I had a question. Why are we going to hold the note, essentially finance this ourselves? What's the advantage to us on that?
We're going to be making about $500,000 more on the property.
Okay. All right. Clearly enough, good answer. Okay. Okay, Councilor Ellsworth.
No, my hand just stays up. I need to put it down.
Just keep it up the whole time. It's fine. Okay, Councilor Hanley.
Yeah, so you mentioned the proceeds from the sale would be benefiting, according to the CIP, and what I recall, the proceeds are supposed to be, I don't know if all of them are needed, but Centennial Park was a major commitment, right?
Yes.
And that's not going anywhere. That's solid.
Yep.
Is that all the money that's going there, or is there opportunity to use, like if we take care of Centennial Park with however much we need and there's leftover to move north to that new property and Slate Canyon master plan, is that something we can explore? I guess what I'm wondering is how strong is the commitment that all $6 million are going to X, Y, or Z? Sounds like there's a strong commitment that some of it's going to Centennial Park, but beyond that, I'm not clear.
Mr. Chairman, at the time we did the specific area plan, which was back in the early 2000s, maybe 2004 or 5, sometime in there, Bicentennial Park was the only master planned park in that area. And so it was the logical place to commit to the neighborhood those funds would go. In the meantime, obviously we have Slate Canyon Park, which is in the parks master plan. And so again, I think the spirit of the commitment was that it would be spent in the neighborhood on parks. How that's allocated, I think is, certainly up to discussion with the neighborhood and with the municipal council in terms of what CIP project in that neighborhood might be the best recipient for those dollars. So again, the spirit of the agreement certainly would extend to additional parks in the Slate Canyon area.
Okay. So presumably we would be getting a proposal from Parks and Rec at some point in the near future about where that money should go.
Yeah, and I think again, we want to make sure we engage the neighborhood, and so again, I think we can see where that leads us. But yeah, there's no interest in, at least from the administration side, about moving that money into some other neighborhood besides this one.
And I misspoke. It is Bicentennial Park.
Bicentennial Park. That's correct. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, now I have a question.
Yeah, Councilor Ellsworth, go ahead.
Sorry. So when the old jail site was developed, I think there was another idea that the money that came from the sales of those homes would also go to these parks or to Bicentennial Park. But I don't think that's panned out the way we thought it would, in part because there was more remediation to be done. Is there anyone on the staff who can speak to that and how we can make sure that we don't get the same situation this time? I mean, it sounds like a great deal for Southeast Provo, which is really a win and a point of pride that citizens who live in this area want. But how do we know that we're getting the outcome that we're talking about?
So in response to that, the agreement is completely different in the property that we had down at the jail. The jail was a very difficult property to actually develop. So the city participated in some of the remediation with the cement and other things. We are still going to have surplus funds on that. And all of those have been set aside, just like it will be here for Bicentennial Park.
Any additional questions? Counselor Whipple.
I just wanted to be sure that I understood. So the reason we are holding it and doing the funding is that's how we got the higher purchase price?
Yes.
Okay. And then as we transfer title to this property, will we be saying that it's subject to the easements and right of way, like for the trails that are already there?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And let me add, on the subdivision plats, we would require that they have the easement specifically on the plat.
Okay. I think there's no additional questions. We'll go ahead and open this up for public comment. Thank you, Tara. We'll open this up for public comment. Anyone online or in the council chamber that would like to comment, please let us know. Okay. Doesn't look like we've got anyone. So we'll bring it back to the council for discussion. Any additional discussion from the council? Councilor Ellsworth?
Yeah, just to clarify, this is currently zoned ag and PF zone. Is that right?
That is correct. The bulk of it is PF, but there's a small area on the east side that's A11, I believe.
Okay. So we'll see it again when it's rezoned.
Correct.
And, okay. And my sincere hope, the council should not be surprised by this, is that it does become a really quality community that adds maybe some vibrancy or some stability to some areas that are kind of cycling down in some cases. So I'm just really hopeful that this is R110 or R18, and that we can add to the diversity of housing stock in this area, and including the diversity of quality in housing in this area. I think there's so much good that could come of a good development in this area. So thanks, Tara, for looking out for us.
Councilor McKay?
I agree, Shannon. I'm really excited this can be R110 or R8, and I'm really excited that the money from the sale is going to go to the Bicentennial Park and the other parks in the area. I know the residents are really excited about it.
Sounds like that's the way to get things done around here. Give it back to the residents in form of a park. Awesome. Any additional discussion? Okay, we'll go ahead and vote on this item. All in favor? It's unanimous here in the chamber. Councilor Ellsworth?
Yes.
And Bill Fillmore is excused. Okay, we'll go back to item number 2. You did. I know what I'm doing. Okay, so John or Brian, do you want to go ahead and explain why we're coming back to this item and what we need to do?
Usually when we adopt a plan, park plan, sewer plan, whatever traffic, we do it by resolution. The resolution to get carried forward on this one, we just put it in, so the resolution is ready to go. So we need to adopt the plan formally through the resolution. So we have to vote on the resolution.
And I would say because of the way this, because we were missing that piece and didn't vote for this, I don't think we opened this for public comment originally. So I'd recommend doing that step before holding the vote.
I guess, Brian, do you just want to explain what we're looking at here with the resolution? I don't think anybody's seen this, right? So,
Yes, for sure. So Dave Decker, when we did item 2, the first time Director Dave Decker stood up and talked about the wastewater collection system master plan and walked you through it and answered questions about it. This is just a resolution that says that the council is formally adopting that plan. And that is all that it does.
okay. We'll go ahead and open this up for public comment and then we'll discuss. So anyone online or in the chamber who would like to come up and comment on this item for 2 minutes, please let us know. Okay, doesn't appear that we have any comments, so let's bring it back for a discussion. Did you want to say something, Dave?
If I can just correct one date on the resolution, it's the third paragraph down. It says March 15th. That date should actually be February 5th. Sorry, it's the March 1st date. I apologize. In the second paragraph, that should be February 15th.
So I think that's the only thing I was going to talk about with discussion is we kind of drew this up on the fly, didn't we? And I guess I worry a little bit about punctual stuff like that, exactly like that. So I don't know if, the lawyers we have in the room want to double check it for us or what, if we're okay or comfortable. Councilor McKay, did you have a comment? No? Okay. Oh, you do.
I did read this document, riveting, but I was interested in, like, my main thing I got out of it was that we have the constraints in the west and in the northeast. I know there's like lots of building going on in the northeast too. And I'm just curious from a long-term perspective, you guys must watch every development and approve it if you're continually watching those numbers. And because I assume potentially there could be a point where you say, hey, no more development. I mean, that's what it said in the document.
So one of the things in the work session master plan that I talked about, and you'll notice in budget presentation and a lot of the utility systems, we talk about hydraulic modeling that happens. And one of the industry standards that's really critical for particularly a city of the size of Provo is to have hydraulic modeling in all your utility systems. So it's not unique just to the wastewater system. We have it with stormwater, we have it with the water system. And so every development that comes in, we actually have engineering and technical people that go into the live model that we have, and they'll plug it in and say, okay, if this development is built in the next year, what happens to the wastewater system, or what happens to the culinary water system? And so we're running those with every development. So yes, we have an active model so that we're watching development day to day.
Any additional discussion?
I just have a question on the drafting. In the last whereas paragraph, why do we have the parenthetical I?
You really don't want to approve this tonight, do you? Usually I says, finds the master plan should be approved, and 2 says, and such action reasonably furthers the health. So they blended those 2 together and didn't take the I out. So we could delete that.
Thank you. That would make me feel better. If we don't have an I don't want an I.
Aye. I said no jokes today. My bad. Sorry, guys. Okay, well, I'm trusting the lawyers in the room. So we'll go ahead and we'll vote on this. All in favor? Unanimous here in the chamber. Councilor Ellsworth?
Yes.
That is unanimous with Bill Fillmore excused. Okay, agenda item number 5. Right? We're all on the same page there? Okay. An ordinance approving the petition to annex approximately 9.5 acres of property generally located at the intersection of Colorado Avenue, Bullock Lane, and 1816 South, East Bay neighborhood. Brandon Larson, glad to have you today, our planning supervisor.
Glad to be here, sir. I want to point out something really quick on the notice here. 9.5 acres, it should actually read 13.75 acre, 3.75 acres. So I think that kind of highlights why we're here tonight. There were a couple of procedural errors on this. You guys looked at it a year ago and approved it, adopted an ordinance approving the annexation of 13.75 acres at approximately Colorado Avenue in 1860 South. There's the property there. There were a couple of little procedural errors like the one I just noted. The biggest thing is that there's a document called Notice of Impending Boundary Action that needs to be created and then signed by the chair and then sent to the Lieutenant Governor's office. That document was never prepared, never signed. And so when I tried to go record this at the county, they're like, "Where's your Notice of Impending Boundary Action?" And I'm like, "Well, we don't have one." So we're back here to include that document in the record and fix a couple of these issues with the acreage. So this was approved, and we just want to make sure, we need to make sure that we've got this one right, so we can, get a certification from the Lieutenant Governor's office for the annexation, and then take that and the other document, the Notice of Impending Boundary Action, and take that along with the plat and record it. So that's why we're bringing this back to you a year later.
Any questions? I don't really understand what's going on, but basically something was approved a while ago and we didn't do it correctly procedurally. And so we have to correct that.
Yes, there's procedural errors, a couple of procedural errors with the references to the acreage. And then this notice that all the notice is basically saying, "Hey, Lieutenant Governor, please give us a certificate of annexation." And it also includes a statement by the chair saying that all of the requirements for the annexation have been met. And so
I guess maybe take us back a little bit. So it sounds like I have to sign this?
It's supposed to be signed by the approval
chair
body.
So I guess maybe just take us back a little bit. What am I signing?
Okay.
I mean, I get procedurally we're correcting something, but
right. So
what are we doing with this property?
What this is, you want to go back to the map?
Yeah.
So this is again off 1860 North or Lakeview Parkway, close to State Street, on the north side of the road. What the proposal is to bring in 3 parcels, bring them in at the in the M1 zone, along with that Union Pacific portion, that Union Pacific right of way there, and what ultimately is being proposed here is a storage facility. This property, and I know sometimes we don't get excited about storage facilities, but I think on this property it's a big upgrade. So right there, this property has had some serious issues with just a lot of debris and junk. It's deep in the soil. I worked on that property a number of years ago at the last jurisdiction I worked at, so I'm very familiar with this property. And so it's a kind of an ugly property, and getting this cleaned up, getting a storage facility that's they'll be held to some pretty stringent landscape designs is a big improvement for the property. So that's what's proposed. We're just simply here to answer the question of whether or not this should be annexed into the city. So that's what's before you.
Sorry, I'm not trying to belabor it, but we annexed it because I guess I just don't understand it. Not that I'm not going to sign it, but I want to understand what I'm doing here. So we annexed it because in order to develop it, it needed to be annexed into the city, or?
Correct. It needs to be annexed, and it has not been annexed yet. The only question here tonight is whether or not we want this property in the city.
Right.
In the M1s, and then it will come in at the M1 zone. And then on its hills, there would be a development there is a development application for a storage facility.
Yeah, I'm not trying to screw anything up. Don't misinterpret why I'm asking the questions. But
Brandon's answer was better than mine. I was going to say because the owner asked us to. But yes, it's so that it actually can be in the city so they can develop it the way they want it.
I have to say, I've seen the development and it looks nice. And I think it's a good asset for the area.
Councilor Whipple.
Yeah, I'm confused as to where the 9.5 acres comes from on these documents.
It's just what happened. This railroad property got added in afterward. I think it says 4 something right there. So 4 + 9, 13. So yeah, it was just added. Is there and I don't know if this is important, but the annexation map, there might be another one in there, but it originally showed just the 3 parcels without the Union Pacific right of way, and that got added a little later and kind of confused everybody. So
So we're looking at adding in or annexing the full 13.786 acres.
Correct.
Even though it says 9.5 on our agenda item.
On the agenda item, it does, but this property was noticed correctly.
Okay.
I noticed it myself. I prepared the notices, and I'm the third person that's worked on this application. And so after I got it, I trying to clean up a few things. So I found some errors, and we're just trying to get it right. The noticing looks correct. We used 13.75 and followed all of the state noticing requirements in the state noticing requirements. So.
Okay. We will, let's see, do we open this up for public comment yet? No, we'll open this up for public comment. Anyone online or in the chamber, please let us know. Looks like nobody. So now we'll bring it back to the council for discussion. Any additional discussion? We all had our questions answered. We'll go ahead and vote on this. All in favor? Unanimous in the chamber. Councilor Ellsworth.
Yes.
That is unanimous with Bill Fillmore excused. Thanks for your patience on that, Brandon. All right, our last item on the agenda is an ordinance amending the Provo City General Plan regarding the Southwest Area Development Policies. This is a citywide application. Hannah Salzel, our planner, will present to us. We did hear this in the work meeting earlier.
I'll do a brief recap of the history. I'll try to keep it more brief just for any public who might be tuning in. If you want a little bit more detailed explanation of some of the Planning Commission's logic behind specific recommendations in this new intent statement they're proposing, I recommend you go watch the work meeting video from today. So these policies are not entirely new. They're based on existing policy that is the future land use map, which is Appendix J in the current general plan, and also the West Side development policies, which are in the general plan currently as 1.2.9 in that section referred to as the Southwest area guidelines. Last year, some counselors thought that maybe those policies needed a little more revision and clarification. So they drafted an intent statement, sent it to the Planning Commission. Planning Commission reviewed it, revised it, felt like they needed to narrow the scope, start the document from scratch, and really just hone in on a couple of problems. They created a working group of some of the planning commissioners, one of the neighborhood chairs from the Southwest or yes, from the Southwest, who was also on the committee that drafted the original West Side development policies, as well as staff. Here we go. So this intent statement was really trying, like I said, to narrow in on just a few problems, which is essentially that on the west side especially, given sewer limitations and market demands and the need to create a diversity of housing stock, especially focusing on varied lot sizes and varied home sizes, the opportunity for move-up housing, homes with more bedrooms, all of which are in short supply in Provo. We needed to discourage overly homogeneous developments while still maintaining the character of the neighborhoods and respecting the input from the public that had been given so far, and also not creating additional burdens for developers as they were trying to develop out there. This is just in chunks on the following couple of slides, the exact proposed intent statement from the Planning Commission based on trying to find some neutral resolution to those problems that I mentioned earlier. The opening paragraph is essentially the same as was in the council's original intent statement, just recommitting to those initial policies in the general plan that I already mentioned. The second paragraph just explains a little bit more why we felt this was necessary. There we go. These are recommendations. You'll note there are a couple of changes from the staff report version. One is that we changed it to recommendations rather than, I think, policies, simply to clarify that this is not mandated or required for developers. The Planning Commission very, very much wanted to make this an optional thing for developers, but something that was strongly encouraged to help them understand the mind of the council and come up with something better that the council is more likely to approve, but that wasn't required again. It creates lot sizes in little brackets, anything smaller than 8,000 square feet, 8,000 to 12,000, 12,000 plus. Again, still subject to the minimum lot requirements of the zone. Those lot sizes would have to be combined in some ratio to ensure a mix of lot sizes, hopefully therefore house sizes and house prices as well. This table is fairly self-explanatory. It doesn't apply to any acres under, or any developments under 10 acres. We found those to simply be too small. That was in the original, staff agreed. 11 to 19, there's this asterisk here that I want to just clarify. In the housing market, small lots right next to large lots don't tend to sell well. It really creates a disjointed look within the neighborhood. So this policy intent statement would recommend having a 25-75 split or somewhere in that range, no more than a 25-75% split. So you could do 60-40 or 50-50, but you couldn't have like a 20-80 of either small and medium or medium and large. And someone on the council earlier today asked, so you couldn't do a medium and medium, right? And that's absolutely correct. You have to do small and medium or medium and large, but you cannot do small and large. For 20 or more acres, that ratio goes down, but you have to have all three kinds. This remainder here simply means whatever the ratios are here within this bracket, whatever gets you to 100%. Part two of the policies, and this is essentially it, is that green space is strongly encouraged, and we encourage developers to use gray or non-potable water. That's post-consumer or non-drinkable water that wouldn't be coming out of a tap. It's a lot more environmentally friendly and sustainable, and also to use water-wise landscaping. Developers can decide how to integrate the different lot sizes within their plans. We would not mandate that one type has to be next to another, or you have to have so many on a certain block. And then the final point is a much needed clarification within these West Side policies that acreages should be gross, not net. Previously, they'd been understood to be net, so 4 units per acre net was the cap for the West Side. In residential areas, that translated to about 2.8 units per acre gross. Part of this update would be to change the future land use map and those policies to change it from 4 units per acre, not currently specified, to 3 units per acre gross, which is a 0.2% increase from that current 2.8 units gross equivalent to 4 net, But Public Works has assured us that that is within our sewage capacity, completely fine, and also gives a slight increase as a concession to developers. We have some models just showing the potential ways lot sizes could be combined, but not meant to be any sort of recommendation or instruction, just illustrating the principles on the previous slides. The paler the color, the smaller the lot. Again, they don't apply to 10 acres or fewer, so 11 to 19 acres. This is kind of pushing it with 20, has the small and medium. Again, you'll note no large because we don't allow a small and large combination in this bracket. This is a 20 plus acre development. You can see these ratios fall within those 25 to 40% range, with the remainder being large lots. Here we have small, medium, and large, with medium sort of as a buffer between the small and large. And here's an example with essentially the same development pattern, but the developer could have townhomes offset by that encouraged green space, hopefully again using gray and non-potable water and water-wise landscaping. We've gotten a little bit of feedback so far. The Planning Commission recommended approval unanimously. There was not a specific neighborhood meeting for this, but the plan was posted on the Fort Utah neighborhood page. They liked it. They liked it better than the original, thought it was very respectful of their views and their neighborhood's culture. The development community members that we reach out to also saw it as a positive thing. They didn't see it as being onerous or a burden to development. They thought it was very easy to understand, and it was much simpler than what has been done in a couple of other cities trying to accomplish the same objective, but really just made it so much harder to develop out there. Before I move on, this is where the intent statement will go. I'll keep this very brief for the public since this is mostly for the council and we covered this. Currently, it would go in the general plan with the West Side development policies, those southwest areas in 1.2.9. In the future, it would be an appendix to the future general plan with those other policies so we can really clarify where they apply. Does the council have any questions, want any clarification, or have any uncertainties about these recommendations?
Councilor McKay?
I'm just thrilled to get this done. I'm glad that staff's happy with it. The residents are happy. Developers find it non-burdensome. I'm glad it's simple. I'm excited to get this one behind us.
I'll say thanks to staff and the committee for working so hard on this. I did have a question. Bill, maybe if you wouldn't mind coming up, put you on the spot for a second. So Bill, I think a couple months ago, we were talking about how on the west side kind of development has kind of come to a screeching halt because there was some lack of clarity on this and such. So this mission accomplished, it accomplishes what we needed to kind of get the ball moving, but also still provide some guidance.
Yes, I think it does. I'm much more happy with this than previous versions, largely because of the simplicity, but also just so you'll understand how this will work. You may be wondering, if this isn't mandatory, then what good is it? Why are we doing this? So the way we've always treated general plan policies is that there's very few, if any, that are required. They're general plan policies. If you want something to be required, it needs to go into the ordinance. But whenever a zone change comes in, we evaluate the general plan policies that apply to that zone change, and we point out whether this zone change is consistent with those policies or not. So if somebody comes in on the west side with a subdivision that's 40 acres of 10,000 square foot lots, we would say this subdivision is not consistent with these policies. Planning Commission and City Council, you could deny this zone change based on this inconsistency with these policies, if that's what you want to do. So that's the value in having these. And then the specificity and the diagrams that, according to the developers we've talked to, that makes it understandable. They feel like it's doable without being too high a barrier. We were very concerned about creating barriers to getting the lots that we all want and need on the west side. This seems to avoid that.
So we're responsible to be the teeth of it. If we want it to have any effect, we have to be the ones to enforce it essentially during the zone change process. Now, if there are properties that don't need a zone change though, there really won't be anything we can do about that except, well, yeah, even the 4 units per acre is not in the ordinances, is not in our ordinances, right? It's a policy.
That's right.
So even that essentially has no teeth unless a zone change is needed and we decide to kind of hold them to it.
Yeah, we have a little bit of existing R18 that's undeveloped on the west side, but that's about it. About everything else that comes in.
Everything else will need a zone change, probably. Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was just going to say that, if we really want to do things right on the west side, the next time a development comes and we're feeling the pressure and they're saying, well, I spent, the last 18 months on this and now you're going to make me change it. We have to be the ones to kind of determine whether or not we want to stick to our guns, I guess. So go ahead, Councilor Hanley.
Yeah, so this is, I want to also thank you and Hannah and others who've worked on this. I think it gives a simple expression to, sentiment I had, but is much more clear. I guess my only thought or concern is, or it's not really a concern, it's just sort of a question about process. So I can understand how it gives us leverage if somebody proposes something where there's just nothing there. But if they do propose something, I guess I'm always worried that we're going to get like good enough product, but we're not going to get a really outstanding product. And I've never quite figured out how to squeeze that out of developers. And maybe you can't do that with a policy like this. But if we sense that it could be better, maybe we feel like, oh, why isn't there any green space? And they do have an opportunity for density bonuses if they wanted it, but they didn't take advantage of it. And this is a really great location. Are you saying we would obviously be slowing it down if we said, hey, we would prefer this, or we will say no to this until we see we're still within our rights, right? To say,
Yes.
Obviously I'm not interested in overly complicating this for any developer, but I'm also always sort of frustrated that I feel like the train has left the station. Everybody spent all this time, all this money, and the product we're getting is not really high quality. And I don't want to be like just saying, okay, go ahead, and just giving the rubber stamp to everything that comes through.
Well, first of all, I'm not real sympathetic to the time and money argument because that's why the city council approved us going to a concept plan scenario that's significantly less money than what previously had to be a project plan. So I would push back a little bit on that. The other thing is the thing you never see is the months and months staff spends with the applicant negotiating and redesigning and talking and giving input. We have a 50-acre piece on the west side that it's entitled to about 220 units under the west side map. That ownership group has been very open-minded to working with staff on how to use those 220 units. About half of those are townhomes, about half are lots. How to arrange that in a very creative way and something that we're all going to be happy with. We're hoping that by their willingness to take our lead and let us help them design that we're going to get something that we're going to be proud of. I hope so.
Yeah.
It's looking like it's heading in that direction. I'm being cautiously optimistic.
That sounds good. Thank you.
Hey, Bill, hang on for a sec. So on a related note, but not specific to this item. So sorry to Wayne, I'm going to peel you away from your computer there for a second. Sorry.
No, you're good.
We were talking about how, I think you were saying the Southwest area plan doesn't necessarily coincide with some of the other things we're trying to do. I guess just big picture, just in general, and the 4 units per acre is a challenge because everybody comes in wanting more, and we've already, approved other developments that are higher density. And now how do we offset that by making the next, 15 units come in at an acre each, type thing. I guess I'm just wondering, Bill and Wayne, where do we need to go from here to kind of clean things up on the west side to make sure everything's kind of on the same page? Because I was kind of, and if I read you wrong, correct me, but I was kind of under the impression that maybe not all of our policies or policy documents are all on the same page with how we should approach the west side. Correct or not?
Yeah. So let me try to frame it a little bit.
Sure. Yeah, go ahead.
So first of all, in terms of the desire of the council and the planning commission to create opportunities for mixed housing, maybe not types, but housing sizes, This goes a tremendously long way to solving that problem. So my commentary to Councilmember Hoban really was around my experience here in Provo when I first arrived long time ago. It was the intent that the municipal council at the time wanted to exercise very detailed control over what happened, particularly on the west side, but also in other areas of the city that we're developing. And so the general plan, as it was written, was designed to basically say anything that's not developed is agricultural. And so if you want to come in and do a development in an area like that, you have to come in with a general plan amendment and a rezone, which gives the council a fair amount of control over what happened. And there were times when, others will remember this, when the pitch of a roof became part of a development agreement in a rezone, or whether it was brick or siding or other things that typically are done in restrictive covenants, not necessarily in city ordinance. So while that served well the purpose of trying to control the quality of development that occurred, the downside of it was that when we handed that general plan to Bowen and Collins to do a wastewater master plan, and they saw acres and acres and acres of agricultural land that was not in the general plan to be developed residentially, we drastically underestimated our sewer capacity needs because we were thinking this is going to be farmland for the next 20 years. That's what the general plan says. And that's a document on which we make planning decisions. And so now we're kind of finding ourselves in the circumstance where we've said West Side development should be approximating 4 units to the acre net or 3 units to the acre gross. And so when a developer comes in and wants to do a townhouse development, and we say, oh, well, that's 10 units to the acre, whatever the number is, that means that a development in the future can't do 3 units to the acre, right? It has to do something less than that. So you average across the whole area of a 3-unit gross to the acre. And so the challenge is that as we continue to sort of vary from that, or think at some point down the road, we're going to fix this by having 1 unit to the acre in some new development, that's probably a little bit of a pipe dream, particularly given current land values and other things. It's going to be really, really difficult to make something like that work. And so what we're really doing, at least in my mind, is pushing this, we're creating the same issue, maybe not on the same scale we did before, but we're creating the same issue where at some point you're going to have to tell a farmer who's planned on selling his land as his retirement to say, well, now you can only do 1 unit to the acre because you're the last folks into the equation. And so it's going to be very hard when the farmer's family is sitting here and saying, this is our retirement city council, give us 5 units to the acre or 8 units to the acre. Pretty hard to say no. So what that does is it creates this ongoing dilemma about how do you plan effectively for infrastructure needs. And so my point to Councilmember Hoban was we ought to not let history repeat itself, and we ought to figure out if 4 units is what we want, then we ought to stand firm. If we're saying 4 units, but we think it's likely to be 8 or 10, at least in the next few years, we ought to just admit that that's the case and change the general plan so we can plan effectively for infrastructure. Does that make sense? So my fear has been that we're just going to find ourselves right back where we have been, which is out of sewer capacity with still a lot of land to develop on the west side. So that was kind of my fear and why we were starting to have a little bit of a housing policy discussion about, what is the future of housing in Provo? And, is it where the market tends to push us right now, which is higher density because it's easier to develop and sell, more likely to sell, than it would be to have a 1 acre lot with a farmhouse on it. That's probably not going to sell a lot of homes like that in the future, at least in the near future. So we ought to be thinking long-term, but we ought to be prepared that when we set a standard, we're going to have to be prepared to live with it. And that may mean saying no to some higher density housing on the west side and seriously disappointing a farmer or a developer or someone else in that process. So So again, just trying to make sure we're thinking about the balance between planning effectively for infrastructure and developing the community the way we want.
Thank you so much, Wayne. So my question, Bill, is what do we do? What do we need to do? Because I mean, I'm just going to be honest. I don't see how 3 or 4 units per acre is sustainable, though I love that idea. I just don't see us sticking to our guns on that, because every time something comes to us, it seems to have, and frankly, I guess, you know, I think about a 1/4 acre lot or a 1/3 acre lot, and I think it's hard to say, not that I love the idea of that, but to think that we're going to make sure that every unit has at least that size, you know, moving forward, because we've already used up some of our acreage on the higher density or some of our allocation. I guess I'm just wondering how viable it is. And if not, what do we need to do to get our arms around this? Because I don't know. I don't want us to be in that same situation. I also don't want everything high density, whether it be in Southeast Provo or West Side either. So I love the idea of kind of trying to push for that single family where it makes sense. But anyways, I guess I'm just kind of saying, like, what do we need to do to get ahead of this, and asking for some direction, and maybe we can take it to our committee.
So a couple things. One thing, you'll hear me say this periodically so that we all remember it. And that is that West Side land use map that we refer to frequently and you see frequently, that really is a snapshot in time. I spent months surveying property owners, and that map largely reflects the desires of the property owners at the time the map was made. So any area that you see that's less than the 4 units to the acre, that's RA or A1 or anything like that, that was a result of the input from that property owner. Now, I have no doubt that his heirs or her heirs at some point are going to want more density than that. And that is a true Achilles heel at this. But on the other hand, we have several hundred units on the west side that could be allocated in a lot of different ways. There's 120 that was supposed to be a townhouse development that's now zoned commercially. There's a bunch because we calculated all the LDRs at 13.5 units to the acre, and we've reduced that density to 12. Those changes all went through, y'all. That's created a few hundred units that we could allocate somewhere. We could put those units on the ag parcels, hold them to go there when those parcels come in to develop. So I think we've got some ideas and some alternatives and some ways we can look at this. But understand, the reason why we got to where we are is because of the general plan that used to say 4 units to the acre gross. When a developer lays that out, he ends up with a whole bunch of 6,000 square foot lots. And after we had 3 or 4 subdivision proposals in a row on the west side that were all 6,000 square foot lots, and every one of those neighborhood meetings being very hostile, torches and pitchforks, we said, we got to fix this. Our general plan is telling developers they can do something the neighbors are killing us over. So we got to fix this somehow. And that led to this whole process of coming up with that map. Okay.
Well, I'll let Councilor Ellsworth ask a question. She's had her hand up for a while. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just reflecting on what Mr. Parker said and the system that we've had in the past, which I don't think has necessarily well served us or the West Side. And a couple of points I'll try to string together here. If we're saying that there is like a net units per acre on the west side, then it incentivizes people to develop immediately to get their density. And then those who wait, who don't want to sell or for whatever reason don't sell for 20 or 30 years or don't develop, then they're at a disadvantage. And I don't love that prospect. I know that as a council, we often have to pick winners and losers, but I'd really prefer a fairer process, a fairer allocation, something that's fair to people at multiple points in time, if that's possible. And that was one of my thoughts, and then I forgot the other ones. But the other thing I was going to say is there's been a lot of comments about, you know, the capacity of the sewer on the west side, and I don't believe that has. And someone correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think that's in the ground. And I wonder sometimes if that tail has been wagging the dog. And so I wish that we were, and I hope we are in this instance, I hope we are with the work that Hannah's done, because I think it's good work. But I hope that we're thinking about good planning practices and quality of life and opportunities for residents in that area before we're thinking about infrastructure, so that the tail isn't wagging the dog. And that's what I wanted to say. This is part of a bigger conversation, and I definitely support what Hannah and Co has put together. But yeah, just to feed back into this, some of the comments that Bill Pepperoni and Wayne Parker have made.
Councilor McKay.
I don't understand that, like if someone does develops 20 acres, they have to stick to that 4 units per acre. So they're not taking away from future development of later. I mean, I don't think they can't do higher density and take away from undeveloped land yet.
That's right. The weird thing is the ag land shown on the map that we know or can pretty much guess at some point they're going to want more than ag land there. But otherwise, I think you're correct.
Okay, well, I didn't mean to derail the whole thing, but I don't want to stand up in that situation.
Right.
Sounds like we're okay now. I guess we just need guidance from you as we go along. If we're not okay and we're heading in the wrong direction, we need to know that so that we can react as opposed to just, ending up where we were before. So,
well, there's no plan that's ever been written that was perfect in perpetuity at the time it was written. From the time it was written, all plans require amendment over time. All right. But we need to be careful about going through a neighborhood process to make those amendments. And as that need comes up, that's what we'll do. And you will see those because those will have to come before.
Well, ultimately, if I'm reading between the lines, you feel like we're okay right now.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. That's really all I need to know. Thanks. I guess we technically need to move to public comment on this item. Brian?
We do, but before we do that, Malia, could you bring up the ordinance? I just wanted to point out since you've had the staff presentation that there were some clarifications about this being a recommendation policy rather than a mandatory thing that I worked with Brandon on. So there's been some changes since to the language. So I just want to show you those. So if you can keep scrolling down into the exhibit. So keep going so we can see all of, okay. So this is being added to the Southwest Area Guiding Principles, Policies, and Goals section of Chapter 1 of the General Plan, Subsection 8. There was some tweaks to the language there in paragraph A from what you saw on the slide, just to clarify that the purpose of this statement is to clarify policies and indicate that these are factors that the council is going to be considering if a rezone proposal comes in front of them. The other change over on the other page where it talks about green space, so C sub I, we just clarified the language a little bit. It was possible, I had some concerns that it was possible to read the language that was there, that the Planning Commission reviewed as actually guaranteeing somebody the right to more density if they used green space. So this is revised to just say that the council may be inclined to approve projects with reduced acreage, with reduced average lot size based on green space inclusion. So it's clarifying for everybody that this. So what I didn't want is somebody to stand up to you in front of you at the moment that you've all been dreading when they've been working on this for 4 months and say, but this says I can switch them, right? And make sure that it's at the discretion of the council whether that's allowed or not. So I just wanted to point that out before you moved on.
Okay, any additional questions? If not, we'll go to public comment. Any public comment on this item? Doesn't appear to be any. We'll check online here. Okay, so we'll bring it back to council for any further discussion. Councilor McKay.
Can you go back up, please, back to the ordinance, the new part of it, down there, down below?
Exhibit.
Yes, thank you. It says developers are responsible for maintaining green space. So what if it's green space in the community of homes where they're all sold? Like, can an HOA count for that they're taking care of it?
That's how it's typically done, is that if it is an HOA development, then the HOA becomes responsible for the maintenance of the green space.
Yes, that's correct. So
So that's
developers
just
can be
confirming that.
HOA.
Yeah.
Okay.
Counselor Whipple.
But this would also mean that they couldn't create their little green space and then dedicate it to the city as a park. So the city would then be responsible for maintaining that.
Well, I mean, this doesn't, again, this is all discretionary, right? That is discouraged, and Public Works and Parks and everybody else doesn't like that. So we're putting them on notice that they're responsible. Now, does that mean that they could not ask the city to do that? No, they could ask, and then it would be up to the council to weigh the competing policy interests.
Okay. All right. We'll go ahead and take a vote on this item. All in favor? Unanimous here in the chamber. Counselor Ellsworth?
Yes.
All right, that is unanimous with Bill Fillmore excused. That was the last item we had on the agenda tonight. So in that case, if there is no objection, we will now adjourn the Provo Municipal Council meeting by unanimous consent.
And this was such a collaborative effort with residents and neighborhood chairs and